and welcome to the TTS Talking Early Years podcast. Each week we'll be joined by educational experts from across the globe who will offer exclusive insights, inspiration and guidance that really help practitioners unlock the potential for learning in the early years. Welcome back to TTS Talking Early Years with me, Alistair Bryce-Clegg, and my guest, Debs Davies. And we're talking all about ADHD and how we as practitioners can really support children with neurodiversity. So Debs, in the last episode, we were talking about just how ADHD can affect children differently and also how it can present in lots of different ways. And we've touched on those kind of key points in children's development where we might see it present as a negative as opposed to a positive. And one of the things that really struck me, we've talked, and we'll go back to talk about early years practice, but it's a common issue that at the end of reception, children might have had quite a play-based approach, which has allowed them to do some focused work, but then opportunity to just be in a space and explore that space. And then we move into year one, and it can then turn into kind of sitting on the carpet, listening, going to a tabletop activity linked to the subject, back to the carpet for a bit of a plenary, then a short break, and then repeat, then a short break, and then repeat. And obviously for children who are processing differently, that's not going to be an effective regime to develop them and develop that word that we use, which we can explore again, the potential.
Yeah, absolutely. Transitions is typically something that neurodivergent people, children and adults, will struggle with or find challenges with, whether that be transition between life stages, so through the different school stages, or whether that be transitions from one activity to another during the course of a school day or a work day for adults. So I think recognizing that transitions can be an area where people might struggle the most is really, really important here. It might be that they struggle to take their attention away from something that they are particularly enjoying, for example, particularly if they then are going to be required to do something that is less interesting to them. So that typically will be a challenge. It may also be a challenge for them because they may not actually have remembered the instruction, because working memory is also a challenge or part of our executive function that can be impacted by ADHD. So there might be a number of reasons why a child might actually struggle to go from one task to the other. The other factor at play here, of course, is that starting something is typically one of the things that is a challenge for ADHDs too. So there might be a number of different reasons why moving from one thing to another during the course of the day might be a challenge for a child. It doesn't mean that they're defiant, non-compliant, or that they don't want to do it. I mean, it might be less interesting for them. So sometimes it might be true that they don't want to do it. That won't always be true. And so I think getting beyond some of the assumptions that we might sometimes make about people's presenting behaviour is important here. And understanding with that child, why is it a challenge for them? What's going on that's making it difficult for them to go from task A to task B?
I think, and in the way, again, that our education is set up, even in the early years, it's very adult-driven. We're very kind of driven by the clock. Yeah. So there's a lot of, right, stop at snack time or stop at play time, or it's now phonics time and now you're going to move on to this. So again, I think you will get, for all of us, there'll be times when, if you're playing in something and you're loving it and you've got your hands in the Play-Doh and somebody says, right, everybody stop, listen to the tambourine, time to come and do phonics, you might be a bit like, I'd rather stay with the Play-Doh. But it's about looking at whether this is a repeated behaviour in children across a period of time and a number of different scenarios. So yes, all of us will have preferences for things that we like. But also, I mean, school is quite instructional. Go and get your coat, line up at the door, go to the red table, go to the hexagon table, whatever it may be. And again, you hear all the time saying, I say you to get your coat, Why haven't you got your coat? Or, as an adult, I would have said to children, what did I ask you to do? But you haven't done what I asked you to do. What did I ask you to do? And again, it's that fact that for all children, it might just have escaped their head. But if children are regularly unable to complete a simple task, and it's not about defiance, it's just about the fact that actually you said it and I went in one ear and literally out the other. I saw your lips move, but I didn't hear what you said. So it's not then punishing or being negative about children who are struggling to do that, because then that just heaps on the pressure around, I know that he asked me to do something and now I've forgotten and he's going to ask me again and here's my anxieties going. I think if we think about long-term mental health and well-being, if we all attached anxiety to our usual behaviours because they weren't being recognised or understood by the people that we spent most time with, we'd spend an awful lot of time being anxious.
Yeah.
But because you are able to respond, comply, achieve the requests, you don't have that level of anxiety. What you then get is praise for compliance. So you carry on thinking, compliance is good. When I comply, I get praised and I'm able to comply. So I bob along quite nicely. But actually, I'm not able to comply because of how my brain functions. And you then are negative with me because of my lack of compliance. My day is full of negative points, far less positive points. So my association, even with being in this space with you, even if it's a subconscious one, is a negative one, because most of my time here and my interactions with you are full of negatives. Either you're being negative to me or you're saying, right, stop that, time to move to this. And you might have said it really nicely, but still in my brain, I'm thinking, well, I'm really struggling to stop that. And again, you see it a lot in early years where I had a conversation with somebody just the other day where she tried to gather the children to the carpet for a story, and one child didn't come. He'd stayed with his hands in the sand, as it happened to be. And there was another adult in the room supporting, and she basically gave the other adult the eye and the nod. And basically the nod was, right, go and get him. So very nicely and in a really caring way. This wasn't like wrestling children to the ground, but she was like, then with him in this, come on, time to come to the carpet. And the more she did that, the more he resisted. And in the end, it was a kind of a really clumsy thing where she managed to get him to the carpet, and she kind of sat with him on her knee, but he was all wriggling, he didn't want to be there, and it was all done from a compliance thing. And I'd said to the adult, what would have happened if you just let that child be? And the nub of it was, well, you can't, because if I said to the children, you don't have to come to the carpet when I say come to the carpet for a story, then what if they all decided they just didn't want to come? What would I do? So I need him to come in case the others just decide, well, I'm not going to do it. I was like, but for those children, coming to the carpet for a story is aspirational. They want to listen to the story. They love it when you read the story. They're unlikely to go, aha, he can stay in the sandpit, I'm not coming. And if there are 2 or 3 other children that do make that choice, then maybe it tells us something about what their learning preference is as well. So again, that was an interesting conversation to explore. I think at the end of it, I hadn't made any difference. She was still going to, because for her, compliance was important. And she did say to me, but if my head teacher came in and I'm reading a story and I've got a child who's still playing in the sand, then what's that going to say about my ability? And I was like, well, for me, it says that you are really understanding how your children develop. And she just kind of raised her eyebrows and said, well, not everybody sees it like that. So I think one of the things that would be really great is that we can begin to spread that message to everybody who's involved in children's education. And I know we're focusing on early years here, but the people that make decisions about what happens and what is good practice and what does that look like, if we can really get that message out there. When I walk into a space, if I see somebody who clearly is acknowledging that different children learn in different ways, that doesn't look like everybody sitting on the carpet and look at me, that's a really effective learning space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a key distinction as well to make. If, generally speaking, if a neurodivergent child is not coming to the carpet, it's not a willful won't.
Yeah.
It's a can't. there's something happening that means that in that moment they can't do that. Now, maybe they are able to do that, with a different approach and a different strategy. And maybe also it's not necessary for them to do that, if it might be preferable to actually leave that child there, for that child. But I think to your point about kind of mental health and how people might adapt to those situations, we know that a neurodivergent child, by the time they are 12 years old, will have had 20,000 more negative reinforcements than a child without it. And if you think about that, that's about 5 a day, every single day of their life up until that point. It's huge. And so it shouldn't be a surprise to us that by 12 years old, that child who has been told 20,000 more times than a child without ADHD, shouldn't be a surprise to us that child kind of goes, I'll either comply and fit in and do it how you want me to do it, but, really, I'm not thriving, I'm struggling, and I feel really anxious about it. Or they actually go, I'm not going to bother doing this anymore. I might as well not try. Because actually I've got strengths over here that you don't see, And so the long-term impact of that on a child, on their mental health, on their self-esteem, their feelings of self-efficacy, their ability to advocate for their own needs as a child and as an adult in the workplace, it just, the impact is huge.
It is, and it really starts from being babies, but certainly from the conversation we're having today with early years practitioners. So much of how you feel about yourself, how you link yourself to being accomplished, a learner, successful, happens between birth and 5. Absolutely. Your ability to sit on the carpet, your ability to make a whatever out of plasticine, whatever it may be, those little things, they chip away. And you do get children who won't make a conscious decision that say, right, I've had all this negativity, so I'm making a decision that I'm going to just push against. It's that subconscious, how you build that picture of yourself as a human being and how you fit in. And, we send our children to school every single day, apart from the school holidays, for a lot of years. Yeah. And they kind of come out, 15, 17, almost adults. That huge chunk of that early development is just reinforcing. And you're right, that kind of mental health, that self-efficacy, and that who I'm going to be as an adult, the foundations are put in place, and trying to unpick that and re-educate that brain or make someone feel differently about themselves is so much more difficult to do after 17, say, years of that level of negativity. But that figure is immense, and I'm sure that's probably a generalized figure. I'm sure for some children it's even greater than that, because if at home you have got parents that don't understand your diversity and feel or get frustrated at your forgetfulness or lack of organization or general messiness. I mean, for me, for a long time, it was cupboard doors. Our kitchen cupboard doors, it looked like there's been a poltergeist, because cupboard doors are opened but not shut. Packets are opened and left out. The ham is opened and then left on the side to go green because nobody else in the kitchen. It's like, why can't you just put a lid back on? Why can't you shut a cupboard door? And again, you get naggy like that as a parent, like, come on, we all live in this house, just shut the cupboard doors. But actually, when you understand that it's not I can't be bothered to shut the cupboard door, or it's definitely not I'm leaving these cupboard doors open to annoy you, which is what I would have done. It's I don't think about the cupboard door. I do the thing, I move on, and I leave this debris, in our case, this kind of wave of debris behind us. And, also sticking labels on the cupboard door that say shut the door are not always helpful, because it just reminds somebody that they're not doing something. It's what I had to learn was, does it matter if the cupboard door isn't shut? I can either stick a label on this door that says, oi, you, shut this door or else, or I can think, right, This is not malicious. This is just part of how brain function works. How much effort is it for me to shut all of the doors in the kitchen? Not a lot. Am I happy with that? Yes, I am. So again, that's just me at home with one child. But I think in a setting, you will see children, and again, in early years, it's complex because you'll have possibly schematic behaviors going on. So children will be filling and emptying and transporting, and they're exploring the world anyway. But it's those repeated behaviors, seeing them not as a defiance or as a laziness, for want of a better term, but just as this is how my brain functions. And actually, if I had gone to him and said, would you mind just going back into the kitchen and shutting all the cupboard doors? You probably would have gone, oh yeah, I'm really sorry. Is that me? Right, yeah, of course I will. Come back down, shut the doors. Because it wasn't a deliberate thing. He's not going to say, no, I'm not doing it. So I think, again, for us as educators, it's widening that lens a little bit, looking at those behaviours. And even if they're not neurodivergent children, sometimes that's just a developmental behaviour that isn't deliberate, that's not always conscious, but is just a sign of how their brain is functioning.
Absolutely. And something like leaving the kitchen cupboard doors open speaks to that kind of that lack of awareness or inattentiveness. And I laughed because that is exactly what happens in our house, including me, and I do it too. And I would have sworn to you before my own diagnosis that I thought everybody else did it and I didn't. And actually developing that awareness of the fact that I also do it, but it has made me be more attentive to, have I done this? So I'm now much more likely to notice when I do and actually close the doors anyway. But the question that you raised about does it matter, I think is really, really key here in an educational setting too. Does it actually matter if somebody's fidgeting? Does it actually matter if somebody's jigging their knee? Does it actually matter if they need to move to focus? Yes, there's a need for safety, of course, for themselves and everybody else. That's a given. But outside of those needs for safety, what is it that actually matters most? And where can those needs that children have be accommodated with no detriment to anybody?
And can we change the narrative so that when we look at truly inclusive practice, we recognize what that looks like? And it might be very different to what we see now, but we celebrate the fact that adults are empowered to allow children to fidget, to allow somebody to stay in the sand tray, to acknowledge that they might tip all of the baskets out on the floor in the construction area, even though they're not going to play with all the construction toys, and have a narrative around that says, I observe, I see, and what I'm doing is celebrating diversity. That's what we need to get to.
It's moving away from the assumptions about what that behaviour means, I think, that's critical.
Yeah, that's just kind of reframing what we see.
Yeah.
And at that point, an excellent place to leave this episode. Come back and join us in the fourth and final episode of Chatting to Debs, where we're going to just try and pull together everything we've talked about, although I think we probably could have talked for about a week, and just look at what a more inclusive space might look like and how we as practitioners can empower ourselves to understand neurodiversity with more breadth, and how we can embrace that in our practice in the future. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to our guest Debs for joining us and providing such valuable insights. Now, you've been listening to the TDS Talking Early Years podcast with me, Alistair Bryce-Clegg, and Debs Davies. And if you've been inspired by our conversation today, then don't forget you can sign up via the link in our episode notes to be the first to hear about future episodes and also access exclusive follow-up content, which includes ideas for your settings and links to relevant resources.